to see what's happening. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second session on day 4 of the International Recycling Week virtual conference. The opening session on construction and demolition recycling vertical has nicely set the tone for the whole conference. Before we move on, we'd like to recognize the sponsors for the C&D recycling vertical. We extend our heartfelt thanks to Invest Northern Ireland, the platinum sponsor at the event. We also extend our heartfelt thanks to National Steel Car, the gold sponsor at the event. We have with us Mr. Hassan Ktaech, Associate Manager, Environmental Services at IBI Group. He has extensive experience providing regulatory compliance, engineering, and scientific consulting services to major public and private sector clients in Canada and the Middle East. Hassan's wide range of professional experience includes project management, waste management audits and design, and consulting on designated substances and hazardous materials, corporate environmental regulatory compliance, and government approvals. He also provides environmental monitoring, protocol development, and scientific methodology validation services. Thanks for joining us here, Hassan.
Thank you, Swahila. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the audience. I'm calling from Northern Ontario, a very remote site at the moment. So I'm going to turn off the camera. I'll turn it back on for the Q&A session, just to maintain bandwidth. Okay, let's get right into it. Okay, so the agenda, we'll go through construction demolition sites, the 3 types of modes, health and safety plans, hazardous materials. I'll dive into asbestos and specifically, and talk about the stream, the debris of C&D waste with hazardous material impact. A mention about contaminated soil, just equally as important, and a mention regarding the hazardous waste management infrastructure or lack of in that country that may be dealing with the C&D debris, and some closing statements, and then we'll jump into the Q&A. Okay, so as we go through this presentation and talk about hazards and hazardous materials, we should all be aware that on construction, interior demolition jobs or exterior demolition sites, hazards can be both common and different between the 3 sites, right? So for example, on a construction site, nowadays you will not be installing asbestos containing acoustic ceiling tiles in an auditorium within a school, for example. But on a demolition site of a building that's somewhat historic or old and may contain asbestos containing ceiling tiles, right? So there's a difference. And then the common hazard, of course, would be something like working at height, where it's applicable to both applications. So just keep that in mind as we go through the hazards. Okay, so jumped the gun. So C&D materials have what we call embodied energy, right? This is basically potential energy and resource savings are lost if C&D debris is disposed of in a landfill. What is critical to understand well before disturbance, as shown in this image, is that prior to retrieving these materials for recycled or reuse purposes, it's to understand its content and whether hazards are associated with it. We'll talk about this more as we go through this presentation, but just know that there's both a health concern, exposure to certain hazardous materials, and of course a safety concern, procedures in work related to demolition activities or construction activities. Okay, so I'm not here to speak about the corporate health and safety plan, which is as important as a project's health and safety plan, but we're dealing here more with a project-related matter, and the project health and safety plan basically describes the kind of hazards that will be involved in that project. A component would be dedicated to how the hazards are eliminated, controlled, and what sort of equipment or precautionary measures can be used to ensure the safety of the workforce. but sticking along the corporate health plan, it's these three basic components: a policy, which is of course very straightforward, a statement from senior management executives, right, about their commitment to health, to workplace safety and health, and then the program is developed to support that policy, and of course it should address the basics required for safe and healthy work. And there's specific practices and procedures to common tasks carried out by the operational wing of an organization. Moreover, and part of the program, some roles are assigned to key health and safety individuals of a company to carry out specific health and safety inspection reports for projects. These inspection reports commonly and at a minimum can be carried out weekly or more frequent depending on site conditions. They're designed to help prevent incidents, injuries, illnesses, fatalities. The inspection identifies already existing hazardous conditions, determines the underlying causes of those hazards, monitors hazard controls, and provides corrective action recommendations. Of course, it goes without saying that one of the best ways to manage hazards on site is to ensure that everyone involved in that work is trained to execute the work in the right way, right? Of course, this includes training, hazards, training for hazards on hazards such as, there's a wide range of hazards on a construction site, but just to name a few: working at height, confined space entry, fall arrest protection, working near heavy machinery, the list goes on. Nowadays, with this global pandemic that everyone's dealing with, health and safety plans are also starting to implement, and rightly so, COVID-19 safety measures on site. So to manage this hazard and to prevent its spread. Okay, now hazardous materials. WHMIS, it's a Canadian standard that, that stands for Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. On a construction site, it serves as a communication standard for protecting the health and safety of workers who handle hazardous chemicals, to manage hazardous materials on a construction site, and to ultimately ensure worker protection. Employers must educate and train workers about WHMIS and provide site-specific training on the hazardous materials that are present on site. The key elements of this system is hazard classification, cautionary labeling of containers, the provision of MSDS, so material safety data sheets, and worker education and training programs. WHMIS, there's equivalents to WHMIS, of course, in the US, in Europe, in US, I believe it's called HASCOM. In EU, GHS, globally harmonized systems. So it's and they're all aligned with each other, right? It's the same standard classification. On a demolition site, in addition to the safety hazards, like working around heavy machinery or scaffolding work, there are also hazards associated with the building's material. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, and the province of Ontario, within Canada, we use a term called designated substances. And this is defined as a biological, chemical, or physical agent, or combination thereof, to which the exposure of a worker is prohibited, regulated, restricted, limited, or controlled. In Ontario, we have 11 designated substances under this category, and each of these materials must be safely managed and handled to reduce or minimize exposure. Management is to be completed prior to demolition activities for obvious reasons, of course, because of the disturbance. In addition to the 11 designated substances, there's also other stuff out there that's hazardous that are also need to be considered prior to demolition. So PCBs, mold, ODS, ozone depleting substances, and many more. Okay, so we're just going to kind of explore asbestos a bit more here. For those of you who are not aware of asbestos, it's a naturally occurring mineral. Some of its unmatched properties include resistance to heat and fire, resistance to chemical, biological breakdown. Asbestos does not dissolve in water, nor does it evaporate. These properties mean that asbestos fibers do not burn. They do not undergo significant reactions with most chemicals. They do not break down, essentially, significantly in the environment. Magic mineral, it was termed when it was first introduced commercially. Up until the latter part of the 20th century, asbestos was used in a wide range of products, such as building materials, which we'll cover in upcoming slides, and many other applications, automotive and what have you. Unfortunately, as you all may or may not know, asbestos was found to be a major carcinogen. The main concern is inhaling this fiber. The cancer caused by asbestos has a latency period of 5 to 40 years, and this is dependent on the type of asbestos. There are 6 types, dependent on the type, exposure time, activity, existing conditions of that individual exposed to that mineral, among other factors, of course. I'm not going to go through, the list of where asbestos may be found, because that list is very extensive. But it's safe to say that asbestos was used in almost every public and commercial building constructed before the 80s, or roughly. Yeah. But you can begin to understand really why an investigation to understand if this hazard is present needs to take place prior to demolition. C&D waste, construction demolition waste, and debris must be free of hazards such as asbestos prior to demolition. And that is because prior to scheduling demolition, a survey should have been commissioned. And in that survey, you would sample suspicious materials, produce a very comprehensive report, and it captures all the hazards within that building, including asbestos. As a matter of fact, in North America, EU, Australia, and many other nations, demolition permits are not issued unless a survey of such is provided. And so this is understood to be mandatory. These types of surveys, the pre-demolition surveys, very destructive in nature. They require personal respiratory protective equipment to carry out this investigation. Asbestos competent people, persons, consultants generate this report, gives you a very clear indication of what to expect at this building, and provide recommendations in how to manage them by removal procedures. Something else I just want to quickly note is vermiculite. This is not something that's asbestos containing, but contaminated. Not so much found in the MENA region, from my experience, more in North America. It was some material that was extracted from the Libby mine in Montana, US. And this mine had a natural deposit of asbestos, which resulted in this vermiculite stuff to be contaminated with asbestos. Found in attic spaces and in cinder block voids, not so much a concern. I haven't seen it yet in the MENA region. Okay, so if health and safety matters specifically to hazardous materials were overlooked, then determining whether the C&D stockpile contains asbestos is a very difficult task and an expensive one, and no consultant will do it really, because it would not be a definite conclusion. In Canada, for example, if this waste is generated as a result of human demolition and that no asbestos survey was previously completed, then the waste generated must be disposed of as asbestos waste at an asbestos-approved landfill site, as this classification becomes very difficult and time-consuming, as mentioned. However, if the C&D waste was generated by an unforeseen event, something like that unfortunate explosion that occurred in the port of Beirut, that just disturbed a bunch of structures. And so it would be a different discussion, would be a different approach to understanding that content of the C&D stream as it's generated from a state of emergency. It's a bit more lax, but it's equally stringent when it comes, to protecting the workers involved in dealing with the stream. So contaminated soil is something very important as well to consider on construction demolition sites. Oh, sorry, jumped the gun again. Petroleum hydrocarbons, volatiles, semi-volatiles are to be expected, given that the site is previously known to be contaminated, especially if this site was previously a construction, or sorry, a fuel gas station. These contaminants may be there. Solutions, of course, conventional removal, dig and dump. There's also other stuff out there, chemical treatments, injection, bio remediation as well. So some nations have the infrastructure, right, and capability to receive hazardous materials for disposal and treatment. However, other nations, more so within MENA region, lack this capability and must rely on alternatives. One alternative, exporting the hazard, under the Basel Convention, it allows and it ensures that hazardous waste can be exported when no treatment facilities, sorry, it's jumping on its own, when no other facilities or proper disposal sites are available in that country. Potential recipients that would accept asbestos contaminated waste, for example, from the MENA region include Germany and Scandinavian countries. There's other nations there as well that would expect it, but would require, further examination. Of course, there's offsite disposal design work to allow remediation to happen in that country. And I am sorry, but that would require further investigation. There's also a very innovative solution out there, slowly being introduced to the market, coined neutralization valorization process. And this process is basically based on physical chemical neutralization by targeting asbestos waste with an acidic solution. It generates environmentally byproducts that's used, it could be used in various industrial sectors. And this process, again, very new, has been recently approved following successful laboratory small-scale trials. Okay, so yeah, just to close off, health and safety matters must be given attention at the very beginning and throughout a project, of course. And throughout is very important because new hazards or hazardous materials may be encountered or uncovered during execution of the project, right? So this is very important. So it's important efforts for health and safety are ongoing, continuous, and maintained. Ultimately, a sound health and safety plan is key as it allows and ensures that control measures are in place to manage such hazards and hazardous materials found within the C&D sector. Thank you very much. And let me turn on. There we go. Okay, I can take any questions if any.